Thank you guys for having me. This is fun. I've been in 90-degree weather with 90% humidity for the past summer. It's so hot. I have a hard time going outside, and I love going outside. It's just piping hot out in Chattanooga, and I had no idea it'd be so cold here. I didn't bring a jacket, so if I start shivering up here and my lips start turning blue, it's okay. I'll survive. But it's a blessing to be here with you guys this morning. You know, as I was listening to this, take time to be holy. Speak often of the Lord. I mean, if you just read these words, what a sermon that this says. Just to give you a little bit of a backstory of our ministry, I don't know how many of you are even familiar with some of the work that Little Light is doing. So I'll give you a little tiny backstory, just so you can kind of have a context to some of these things that we're going to talk about over the weekend. I grew up in the Adventist faith, and I grew up with a family that attended Sabbath church every single weekend. I rarely ever missed a Sabbath school. In fact, if my family was traveling through a particular area, we would find the local Adventist church and go to it. And my father was a big proponent of reading the Spirit of Prophecy. I read the Conflict of the Ages series as a child in high school, and I had a lot of intellectual knowledge in my head about the Bible. I was a pretty studious child in being active with our church. And when I got into college, I took some film studies classes, and I pursued a career in television, making movies and television down in Hollywood. And within months of me moving to Hollywood, I completely left everything there was to do with God. Had no interest in Him, just didn't even have anyone around me that had any interest in Him. But God never left me alone. And He continued to pursue me and continued to pursue me. And as I look back over my own course of my own life, I know of so many times that God tried to win my heart, and I'm the one that held up my hand and said, no, I don't want it. But God finally got a hold of my heart and converted me back, and I started traveling around and giving a presentation on the effects that media and television have upon our brains. Movies and television was an interest of mine, and so I think that was one of the activities that God first gave me to do, because it was something I was very passionate and very interested in. But the more I looked at what are these movies and television teaching me, the more I realized it was full of unhealthy and unholy things. And so as I read this, this hymn as we were singing it, and I just said, man, what a gift we have in our Christian faith to walk in the light of God, to have His character, to pursue His holiness. That is such a gift, because I'll tell you what, I've spent time in the world, and it is not happiness. True happiness, true peace that passes all understanding is only found in God. So I just want to share that with you this morning so you kind of have a little bit of a context. Our ministry mostly speaks to youth. We have a very strong passion to share some of these beautiful Adventist truths that our church has been blessed with, and to share them with the young people of our church. Young people they get a bad rap, especially the millennial generation. And, they're entitled, and people title them lazy and this and that. But, they are a wonderful group. And when we speak to them, they will respond to truth. I've seen it time and time and time again. We don't have to just entertain them. We can actually tell them some pretty heavy truths, and they respond quite well to it. So this particular weekend, I chose kind of a variety of things that deal with the media. You'll see a few different aspects. Today, we're just going to talk about the influences that we have all around us, and how do those influences actually impact us. Because if we can kind of understand how those influences impact us, you'll begin to see that it really, really does matter what you put in front of your eyes, even who you hang out with, even what kind of books you read. All of these things have a major impact upon our lives. So that's what I'm hoping that you'll gain out of today's talk, and we'll get started right into this. I titled it Influenced. Are we influenced by the media? Yes, but how do we know? Because the most common question that young kids always say is, I've been to church, I've read my Bible, I know the truth, I can distinguish the good from the bad, and I can filter between these two. How do I know what's going to be impacting me in a way that I don't want it to impact me? There's a couple verses I want to read to you. In Proverbs 23:7, it says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." So what we have going on inside of our brains determines who we are. So it's important to understand whatever affects our thoughts often affect our characters in who we are. Romans 12 verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed by this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove that what is good and acceptable, the perfect will of God." So what Paul is getting at here is God wants us to have a renewed mind, a new way of looking at things. And to have this new way of looking at things, this is what God is promising, this transformation of our old selves into the will of God. 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5 says, "Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ." Now, to me, this is a beautiful verse and a beautiful illustration of what God is desiring of every single one of us. He wants us to have His mind, His thoughts, His way of looking at the world around us. And so this to me, I read as a promise. Now, I'm going to show you a quick little graph because I want to show you what the general use of time that people in the United States do with their time. If you notice this little tiny graph right here, the purple is how much people actually sleep. They sleep about 9 hours out of the day on average. That's actually more than I would have thought. People work about 6 hours on average out of the day, represented by the red, and the rest of the big pie chart is leisure time and sports. People spend about 3.6 hours in doing leisure things, whatever you want. And the majority of that is made up of playing, watching TV, playing video games, or playing sports. So this is kind of a overarching average of how Americans actually use their time. I want you to notice this little tiny pink sliver right here, and it says people that spend time doing religious and civil activities is 20 minutes out of the day. This is the average that people spend. So the reason I want to bring that up is because if you look at where you spend your time and what you spend your time doing, that has a huge impact upon your life. So if you spend most of your time in sporting activities or television watching or something like this, and you're not really waking up and spending more than 10, 20 minutes, maybe you read a couple verses and then you move about your day, I'm going to bet that those TVs and those movie watching or sporting events probably have a larger impact in your life than you have with those 20 minutes that you're spending with God. So I wanted to bring that up because I wanted to show you a couple of clips on how we associate learning. We have these things inside of our brains called mirror neurons, and they help us identify with people. God designed our brains to learn from each other and to feel sympathy for each other and to interact with each other. And so this guy's going to talk a little bit about what these mirror neurons actually do in our brains. I think there's audio here. Audio engineer is coming. There you go.
We may have some special circuitry in our brains that helps us whenever we look at each other. Well, as it happens, scientists have an explanation for this strange ability to connect. It's new. And it began entirely by accident at a laboratory in the lovely old city of Parma, Italy, where a group of brain researchers cell that always fired made this sound whenever the monkey would grab for a peanut. So the lab had all these peanuts around, and whenever the monkey made its move, the neuron would fire. Scientists thought, now here's a neuron that is essential to motion. It's a motor neuron. Then one day the monkey was just sitting around, not moving at all, just sitting, when a human scientist came into the lab, and when that scientist grasped the peanut, the monkey's cell fired. Now, the monkey had moved. It was the human that had moved, suggesting that this neuron up here couldn't tell the difference between seeing something and doing something. Seeing and doing were the same. Or more intriguingly, that for this neuron, watching somebody do something is just like doing it yourself.
So what he's basically getting at here is they stumbled upon this by complete accident. And in their studies, they were trying to understand how the brain works. And as they were watching this monkey's brain fire, when he watched the scientist take the peanut, it dawned on them. If we see someone do something neurologically in our brains, it's as if you are doing it yourself. Now, I want you to really sit and consider that, because how many of you have grandkids or sons or daughters or somebody that plays video games? Anyone? Right? Have you ever seen them play video games that you know maybe is not a good idea for them to play, right? Neurologically, when we watch someone do something, in our brains, it's as if we're doing it ourselves. When we watch movies that have killing or robbery or stealing, think about the impact that this has upon our minds. Now, he goes on to test this by putting someone in an fMRI machine, and he shows how the brain works in this way.
To demonstrate, he put me into this very powerful fMRI brain scanner that can peer into the brain while it's working. And he gave me some goggles so he could show me pictures when I was in there.
So you can see here the eyeball of Robert.
And once he had a good view into my brain,
Nice looking brain.
thank you.
Robert, you're not supposed to talk when we scan you, all right?
Sorry. Then he said, okay, I'm going to show you a bunch of faces. And for each face, I want you to imitate it. So I did that. Then he recorded my brain while I moved my facial muscles.
We're going to do it right away in Ireland.
Okay. Then he said, okay, same faces, but this time, don't move a muscle. Just look. So I looked. When we checked the results, oh, there's my brain. I've never seen my brain before.
This is your computer, Robert.
Jacoboni says that the part of my brain that's working when I make a face, the same part gets busy when I see the face.
So they were able to scientifically test this, and they noticed that the activity in the brain was happening in the same way only when you observe somebody do an action, as if you were actually creating that action yourself. So to me, just looking at the science of how our minds work, it's very important to pay attention to what kind of things are you allowing in front of your eyes. Because see, the devil is really brilliant. He's really one of the most intelligent beings that have been created. And he's bent his intelligence for evil. And his intelligence is by far superior to what we can possibly comprehend. And he's created a device where we watch other people sin. And we say, it's not me, I'm not the one doing it. It's just this guy over here. He's the one that's doing it. I'm just a passive observer. But look at what the science is showing us. When we watch other people sin, it's as if we are doing it ourselves. Makes a whole lot of sense when you read the Bible, and David said, "I will set no wicked thing before my eyes." Right? Why? There's things that I believe that God was impressing upon them well before we even had this technological scientific data. How many of you are familiar with social pressure? Anyone? Social conformity? You ever seen any of these social conformity videos? These are actually really kind of fascinating to me when I saw this. They wanted to test, when you're in a group and everyone is doing the same thing, then would you conform to it because of the group doing this particular action? And here's an example of this. They'll explain what all these people are doing in the doctor's office here. There's audio on this one, I think, too.
Take a look at this crowded waiting room. These people may appear to be waiting for the eye doctor, but they're actually waiting for the first test subject in our hidden camera experiment. And here she is, right on time for her 12 o'clock appointment.
Hi, how are you doing?
This woman thinks she's here for a free eye exam.
Have you been here before? No, it's my first time.
What she doesn't know is that everyone else in this room is working for us.
I'll be with you in just a couple minutes.
Today we're running an experiment on social conformity, and the test starts now. Did you hear that? These people sure did. It doesn't take long for our test subject to notice a pattern. Beep means stand up. But why? And if you were in her shoes, what would you do the next time the tone sounds? While you might think you make your decisions all on your own, when it comes to peer pressure, all too often, your brain is just following the crowd. It's all around you, every day, an invisible force you're probably not even aware of. It affects what you do, how you think, and who you are. It's called social conformity.
So there's lots of examples of this. There's an example of where a person took a huge chart and drew 3 lines on it. One that was about this long, one that was about this long, and one that was really tall. And he brought everybody into the room, and they had one subject that didn't know what was going on. The rest of everyone else knew what was going on. And so they said, which one of these lines is the shortest line? And everybody that was in on the joke picked the one that was the longest line. Just to see if everybody chose that one, would the one person that didn't know what was going on choose the shortest line? And sure enough, all the time, they would choose the longest one, saying that it was the shortest one. Why? Because everybody else was doing it. Here's another example that I found that was kind of interesting. This guy starts standing in a line. There's no description of what the line actually says. It just says the line starts here. That's it. No instructions or anything. And they wanted to see if people came by, would they just stand in line because many people are standing in line? So people are naturally curious. They're asking him, why are you standing here? And, he just says, oh, it's a line. And so I just decided to stand in it. And sure enough, these 2 couple come by here, and he kind of entices them like, hey, yeah, I just saw this sign and I wanted to be the first in line. And so he stands in this line. And the 2 end up joining him in line. And before long, more people and more people and more people started to come, and everybody started to stand in line. They had no idea why they were standing in line. Now, as this line completely grows, it's quite impressive how large it gets. They wanted to do a second thing. If we now started to walk everybody around, how long would they walk with us before they actually said, this is ridiculous, and left the line? And so they were testing people just to see how much their tolerance was, and they started walking them all around. No direction where to go. And people just followed like they were going to some great event, and they had no idea where they were going. And so they brought them through this little maze. They even put a little line in the floor, and they wanted to see if we jump over the line, would everybody else jump over the line with them? And so the first guy demonstrates it and what we call modeling it. And as he modeled it, he's the only one that knows what's going on in the room. Everyone jumps over this line. This is quite impressive. But this is actually a real social experiment with people. And he got them to do some pretty silly things that I think is pretty shocking that people would do that not knowing what's going on. But the reality of it is we are monkey see, monkey do. We love, as a human race, to to do what everyone else is doing. Right? So when we see someone doing something that is not in accordance to your Bible, we are more likely to follow what those people do. These are real clips, are real posters from movies that came out in the beginning of the year. Acts of Violence is one of the movies that Bruce Willis came out in. But you see, I want to show you the stark difference of what the world puts out and then what the Bible says. Because the Bible says in Matthew 5:21 and 22, you have heard it said of the time of old that thou shalt not kill, that whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of that judgment. But I say unto you that whoever is angry with his brother without of cause shall be in danger of that judgment. Jesus is illustrating a very profound point here. He's saying, listen, you don't have to actually take a gun out and kill someone to be in danger of the judgment of killing. All you have to do is have the desire, like angry with someone, and you are worthy of that same judgment. Here's another poster that came out in the beginning of the year. It says permission. Obviously, you see a man and a woman in a bed together. And underneath, it says, how can you be certain that he is the one if he's the only one? Psychologically, what is that telling you? That tells you, like, you should test drive everything, right? You don't need to just pick one. Why don't you try all the flavors and see which one you like? That's not in accordance to my Bible. In fact, what my Bible says is that whosoever looketh lustfully after a woman has committed adultery in his heart. You don't even have to go through with the act to have that sin. All you have to do is start it in your mind. You see, the devil's brilliant. He's created these devices in our world where he can get us to do all kinds of things and we don't even think we're doing them because we're not following through with the act. But you know what? We are in our minds. There's also movies that came out that called Den of Thieves. I mean, these movies that are about killing and robbery. When I was in Hollywood, I was obsessed with guns. I'll tell you a funny little story. I was down in Brazil recently, and they brought me out to this little academy that was way out in the middle of the jungle, basically. And there was thousands of kids at this thing. I mean, the room was just packed. And most of them don't speak English. I'd always have to have a translator. And one little Brazilian boy came up to me and he said, "Oh, you're from America. Do you have a gun?" I said, "No, I don't have a gun." But that's what the world thinks, right? Americans, everybody has guns. When I was in Hollywood and I wanted to make movies, I was obsessed with guns. In fact, most of the earlier films that I made with all my friends, every single one of them had guns in them. I just wanted guns, shoot them up, kill them up, right? But look at what the Bible tells us in Romans 1:32. Who knowing the judgment of God, they which commit such things are worthy of death. This means that, listen, if I pull a gun out and I kill somebody, I am worthy of the judgment of killing, and it's worthy of death, according to the Bible standards. But look at how Paul illustrates this. Not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. Meaning, it's not only the people that commit that murder, but it's those people that take pleasure in them that commit that thing are also worthy of that judgment as well. So we need to be careful with liking certain things. That, I used to like bank robbery movies. Oh, that just seemed like it would be so much fun to go into a bank and, it's just a thrill, right? No. The Bible is very clear, thou shalt not steal. The very act of me wanting to do that is wrong. Have you ever heard of binge watching? You guys know what Netflix is, right? So Netflix has really opened up the door. You used to have to go to the movie department and you'd have to stand there and read all the titles and pick out a movie. And, it was a long process. But Netflix changed all that. You can now watch an entire season of a show, 13 episodes, in one sitting. If you want to watch 13 hours of something right in a row, you can do that right in a row. So there's a lot of things that have been coming out on the internet recently. NPR had something come out that said, binge watching is the new crack drug. And here's what they're finding out, that it could actually be making people completely depressed. There's article after article. Here's the New York Post. Binge watching is detrimental to your health. Here's ABC that binge watching TV series is detrimental to your health. There is so much research starting to come out that says the more and more that you soak up these things, the more and more it will have a profound effect upon your psychological well-being. And isn't it interesting that we are battling so much depression in our teenagers today? I mean, in the world, I shouldn't just limit that to teenagers. The world is obsessed with this. Another thing that I want to bring up too is, 3D movies were quite popular a little while ago. That was kind of the big craze. Everybody thought everything was going to turn 3D. And in fact, a lot of people, sometimes when I go and speak, even at places like the GYC or something, and I ask, who here has seen a 3D movie? You would be shocked. 90% of the hands go up. 90% of the hands go up. So I Googled, well, what happens inside of your brain when you watch a 3D movie? Like, what's actually going on in the physics of the brain? And here's what I found. This is a doctor that comes out of Boston's Children's Hospital. He says that when you're sitting there looking at the giant screen, you're staring at 24 images that flip by. That's an incredible amount of information your brain has to process. 24 images. That means it's like blink, 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 and your brain is putting all of that together. And it says when your brain is processing this stimuli, it does little else. In fact, the prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain that's involved in impulse control, future thinking, and morally choices, is basically inactivated during that process. It is why you get lost in a movie. You shut off your frontal lobe. Now, question, where do I speak to God? So do you find that interesting? That when you go and watch a movie, you completely shut off your ability to talk to God, but yet you open your mind as wide as you can open it. It's really fascinating that when I read so many times from Mrs. White's writings, be careful of the theater, be careful of the theater. She didn't even see a 3D movie in her day. And here we are today, looking back through the wake of time and saying maybe there was something that she had to say about that it's an impactful event. Think about that. And there was an interesting article that came up quite a few years ago, way back in the early 2010 era. There's a couple of rap stars that were given by the BET, they were given Teacher of the Year awards. Now, when I saw this article, I was kind of fascinated by it. Why would they be given Teacher of the Year awards? That's kind of really fascinating to me. And here's what the article goes on to say, the reason why. They were named the best male and female teacher after judging them on several categories, deeming them more influential than teachers who actually committed themselves to children's education. Of course they're teachers. They actually influence our youth stronger than a teacher who the youth spends time with every single day. There's articles all over the internet on the power of celebrities. Taylor Swift, she had a piece come out in Time magazine. And I read the article, and it said that Swift is happy to minister to them. She's a musician, for those of you that don't know who she is. And she's talking about her fans. She's happy to minister to them. I found that a very interesting choice of words that she used. The kids are discovering how music tells them how they're going to live their lives and how they should feel and how it's acceptable to feel. And I think that's kind of exciting. So here she's saying, my music is influencing these young people, how they should live their life, how they should feel, how they should act, how they should dress and walk and talk. And she said, I think that's pretty neat that I have that ability to influence that. Celebrities know how much influence they have over us. Time magazine did an article on celebrity worship. How much does it actually impact you? And in the article it said, the reason why celebrity worship is so impactful is because people form bonds in their minds with their favorite celebrities. They're able to think about that celebrity and take on that celebrity's characteristics onto themselves. And that's why they were saying that celebrity worship is a good thing. Because if you take on a hero's characteristics, then you yourself might be more of a hero. But you know what I find is really interesting? The more that you focus on Jesus Christ, who are you going to want to be like? Jesus Christ. The more that you focus on the things of this world, who are you going to want to be like? The people of this world. It's simple science, and even the world is understanding that, how it all works. This was kind of interesting. I've really looked into the advertising industry, because the argument that I hear from a lot of children and young kids and teenagers these days is they say, I know the truth. Come on, I can filter the good from the bad, and it doesn't affect me. So I believe that everything affects us. Everything you see, taste, touch, hear, all of our senses, anything can have a profound effect upon your life. And the advertising industry is well aware of this. There was a movie called Anchorman that came out a few years ago. And this particular character is one of the guys in Anchorman. And Dodge had commercials that they put out into the world. And in the commercials, they were basically just silly commercials. So what he said in the commercials, it said nothing about the function of the car. Didn't tell you how far it drove, didn't tell you the gas mileage, told you nothing about the function of the car. You know what it told you? How many sandwiches you could fit in the glove box. How many pieces of bubble gum you could fit in the center console. That's all they told you about the car. And look at this article here. Dodge sales immediately went up by 40%. 40%. That's incredible. Why? Because they put a celebrity on it that was attached to a movie. There's a interesting thing with celebrities and why they actually promote products. Brad Pitt came out in a commercial that was not too long ago for a men's cologne. Chanel is a woman's perfume, and it was the first time that this company wanted a male to represent their company. And they paid Brad Pitt $7 million for this commercial right here.
Not a journey. Every journey ends, but we go on. The world turns and we turn with it. Plans disappear. Dreams take over. But wherever I go, there you are. My luck, my fate, my fortune. Chanel number 5.
That was the commercial.
Inevitable.
$7 million for that? So my question with that is if it doesn't affect you, why would they be willing to spend so much money for literally something that my 6-year-old could have shot? Right? There was no creativity in that. That was not interesting. What he was even saying had no relevancy to anything whatsoever. $7 million he was paid for that 30-second commercial. So here's why I bring that up. They have a lot of power over us. You guys remember Catherine Zeta-Jones and T-Mobile? Do you know that was such a successful campaign that they did with her? They paid her $20 million to be the face of T-Mobile. And it literally put T-Mobile on the map. Do you know Tiger Woods? $100 million contract just to wear Nike and just to be the face of Nike. That's an incredible amount. Anybody want to take a guess on who the highest paid celebrity ever is? Ever, of all time? I'll give you a hint. He plays soccer. Probably many in our country have never even heard of him. David Beckham. You ever heard of this guy? $160 million just to be the face of a product. They wouldn't spend that money if it didn't work, right? That would be a bad use of money. They know, as best as the Madison Garden knows, if they put something out there on a celebrity, people will follow those celebrities. They will do what they do, wear what they wear, say what they say. They know it without a shadow of doubt, and they're willing to put their money behind it. This particular character is a guy who I'm going to skip kind of through this just for the sake of time, because I want to show you a few things on just how advertising affects us. This is an illustration of subliminal advertising, and they often have a term called sex cells. The reason being is it's attached to our emotions. So this is a picture that's depicting something sexual. Does everybody in the room see it? Does anybody not see it? The word, there's something sexual about the picture. Does anybody see in the flower, the word sex is actually written in the flower? But when you take your eyes away and then you were to look back at that, you will always see that word. And so what happens is they do this in products all the time. And to many of us, we're unaware of it. Here is the Skittle company putting the words very close proximity to each other. Axe soap, they have an S-E-X, S-E-X. And then this one doesn't actually have the S in it. But if you notice, they have a little advertisement at the top of the soap that says you get 33% more, and they show you a picture of a female. So what does the female have anything to do with the soap? So they use these tricks all the time to sell you products. Why do they sell a car with a beautiful girl? What does the beautiful girl have anything to do with the function of the car? She doesn't, but it's an emotional attachment. And if people think pleasurably about a product, they seal it into your minds. So this is one of the reasons why they use celebrities and people that everyone's familiar with to get you to be familiar with their products and brands. And by default, they know that people will go out and buy those. And we've seen this over and over and over again. We know that it has an impact on us. So people that say, oh, it doesn't have any impact on me whatsoever, really would benefit from probably just taking a look into the advertising industry and seeing some of the technology that they have been using. There's a little chemical inside of our brain called oxytocin. It's a chemical that is released when a woman has birth to a child, and it's what bonds that child to the mother. And it's a hormone that's released called oxytocin. And this guy, we were down in Loma Linda once, and we found a neuroeconomist that had studied this particular drug called oxytocin. He'd been on all kinds of TED Talks, and Hollywood and the advertising industry had commissioned him to study these chemicals inside of our brains so that they could take his information and build products that would make you attached to his products. So here he's going to talk a little bit about that.
Discovered that this hormone called oxytocin facilitates trust between strangers. Because when someone trusts you, your brain releases this and it motivates you to reciprocate, to be trustworthy. So this led us into a variety of studies where we both measured and manipulated oxytocin in the human brain to figure out why we had so much trust between strangers. So since we've done that, we started looking at trust in other things, like in people you don't know, politicians, the government, advertisers. So for advertising, we asked this question, which is, why are there puppies in toilet paper commercials? Puppies don't use toilet paper, they have nothing to do with toilet paper, unless you're really out of toilet paper, you might use the puppy. So what's going on with that? So we all know intuitively that advertisers want to grab our emotions. They want to engage us in this product. They want us to trust them, to trust this product. So we started thinking that maybe this has something to do with oxytocin. So let me describe an experiment we ran to test that. So we had an experiment where we had people view public service advertisements, like don't drive drunk, here's what can happen to you. And we put half the people in the experiment on oxytocin and half on placebo. So we can infuse oxytocin into your brain through your nose, and oxytocin will get into your brain. What we found is that when oxytocin was raised, that is when you're in this trusting state, this empathic state, people did say they cared about the people in the commercials more. And more tellingly to me, when we gave them an option to donate money to these different causes, people on oxytocin donated more of their own money that they earned for this experiment to these particular causes. So it seems like advertisers have figured out how to get our brains to release oxytocin and make us trust, want, identify with their project. Things like
So anyway, you put babies and small cute animals in commercials and people just love it because we all like kittens and bunnies and cute babies and things like that. But what we don't really realize is they are pulling at your emotional heartstrings and they're releasing chemicals inside of our brains that are bonding us to these particular products. And there's a lot of research that goes into that. And why I'm kind of like building this up on you is because in the movie world, there is an incredible amount of research that goes into the movie creations as well. Sometimes 10 plus years of learning how technology works and releasing things out into the public. I mean, many of us don't see those kind of things that happen in the background. And then when you just watch the movie, you just think, oh, it's just a movie, but you don't realize that they've honed in on those skills, and it's a very impactful experience. Here's another classic example of how much our brains are affected by everything that's around us. This guy is kind of a well-known, he deals a lot with like neuro-linguistic programming, which is programming people's brains using language. And he wanted to do an experiment where he took 2 advertising agents, so people who are in the advertising world, they do this for a living, and he wanted to see, okay, if I use these tricks on an advertiser and manipulate them and use the same brain games that they use on other people, would they be able to spot it? So this is what he's testing, and here he'll kind of explain what's going on here.
I invited 2 members of Saatchi & Saatchi, the world-famous advertising agency, to a secret location to propose an unusual task.
You see that? He lost his woman.
Those who work in advertising are masters of persuasion. They subtly weave their images and slogans into our daily lives, knowing that we will register so much unconsciously and then walk into a supermarket and feel a sense of familiarity with a product we think we've never heard of. Billions of dollars a year are spent on it. It's brilliantly calculated and we all fall for it. So I thought I'd turn the tables on the advertising experts. Hey, Graham, good to meet you. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. A real pleasure. Thank you so much for coming out and doing this. Let me get down to explaining what this afternoon's about. I'm going to ask you, in the space of about 20 minutes, to come up with a kind of an advertising campaign, a poster for a product, which I'll tell you about. Okay? And it's a chain of stores, and your job is to come up with the name of the stores, some sort of strapline or slogan for that, as well as the actual image itself, the picture. The only only giving you 20 minutes, it's really important that you go with the very first things that come into your head, and not giving you too much time to think about it. So it's a kind of an instantaneous thing, whatever it is that comes out. So while you do that, we're going to leave you alone, and then we'll come back and see how you've done. I've also got some of my own ideas here, which I'll ask you to hang on to that, and we'll look at those later on as well, and see how that goes. Any questions?
So 3 things.
3 things.
Store, campaign.
The store, the campaign, and the product. You also need to know what the product is. I'll tell you what the product is. This is what the store is selling. Okay. So it is a chain of taxi journey stores, and you're going to come up with the campaign for them.
Did you get this through customs?
Just about, yeah. I've been into this since I was 3 years old, so I'm really interested to see what you come up with. All right, we're going to leave you for about 20 minutes to do that, and I will see you in a bit. And I'll just, I'll put that under the record. If you can keep half an eye on that, and we'll come back to that later. Okay.
Start with the name, huh? Should be like the first things on our mind. Should be called Ted's Taxidermy. Have a pet without the trouble. Dead pets are us. Out of Africa. Want to call it Out of Africa? Or maybe it's like, it's a kid at the zoo, you know, and he's trying to take his picture with one of the animals. A couple of lion cubs, and they're crying.
Kind of real animals, and the man are puppets.
Done.
Okay, your time is up. Yes, you've got a little over 20 minutes. So you've done your ideas are on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what. Actually, in fact, can you come up and stand here? So do you want to grab the envelope as well? No one's touched that and been anywhere near it. No? That's been under the raccoon. Yeah. First of all, obviously, this is a little unfair getting you to do this in 20 minutes. Normally, you'd presumably, how long would you take with an average project? Would you get a few weeks?
As long as possible.
As long as possible. Okay. So this is obviously the first things out of your head. This is one idea or several ideas you've got?
Like 2 or 3 ideas.
3. Oh, okay. All right. as Out of Africa.
Yeah.
That's just
The name of the company?
yeah. It's just as real as it gets.
As real as it gets, is the kind of straight
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
And this would be like a big, that's great. And you've got the tears, so you've got a frightened kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are the others similar or very different?
Different actually.
Okay, same title. I love these. These are really great. And the it's like a lizardy, dinosaur-y kind of creature there. And what's this? A little one calling out "mommy."
It's so real that he thinks like, oh, mommy.
So the little one's lost his mummy and is crying. And again, you've got as real as it gets down there with the strap line. Again, clearly don't like taxidermy.
No.
One more, film one.
Yeah.
Okay, so something Out of Africa. Add some wild to your life.
This is just the funny visual where like a granny or older guy is driving home and he just went shopping at the store and he's got the lion in the back seat.
What interests me most in this one is the fact that you've used a car, that you've used an automobile, which makes sense to you when you watch the show back, I think. I love these are great, and just the kind of thing I was after, so thank you very much. I did have, you've got the envelope, I did have a few ideas before, which I want to kind of throw into the mix as well and see what you think of those, so if you can open that up for me. Cool. So,
Should we show it?
yeah. So look, by no means spot on. Actually, I'll put this up again. So Out of Africa, that's great. You've got that spot on. As real as you like. I've got here, but as real as it gets, which is pretty close. And you've gone for the lizard dinosaur creature later on in other pictures.
It's
but
the
you've
second
gone,
one. Yeah.
yeah, you've gone for the crying thing here, and you went for
Mommy. Very similar.
yeah, it's very similar. Isn't it? It feels like all the components are here. All the components from your different pictures are in this. Polar bears as well. Do you get polar bears at all?
It
Yes.
did in the last one actually. Yeah.
Is that over there?
We never showed because we were like, well.
We were that one. That was gonna be a polar bear.
So you've got, all right, yeah, that is a terrible polar bear. I'm with you on that. But interestingly, the fact that you weren't able to draw it to me is interesting because I've got here polar bears to dinosaurs. On here, it's only a word, right? There is no picture, there's no visual. I'm not giving you a visual for polar bears, but you have written it. So if you knew the amount of expense and time and effort we've gone into making this work with you guys, you'd be flabbergasted. But for now, it's a real comfort to know you're as susceptible to subliminal persuasion as the rest of us. So thank you so much for your time. When you watch the show back, it will make glorious sense to you. For now, it probably won't, but I need that review for a moment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. See you next year. Thank you.
Pretty impressive.
He pretty much had like one piece of paper, all the ideas we went through in the past 20 minutes.
Even with the name bang on and with the tagline as well, pretty close.
Wow. Weird.
If you're wondering how I managed to predict what the advertising executives were going to come up with, just watch their taxi journey again. So there's a chain of taxi journey stores, taxi journey stores, taxi journey stores.
So anyway, everything we have in our lives affects us. There's a reason why people put lots of money into billboards. They wouldn't spend that money if it didn't affect anybody. That would be a bad use of your money, right? I mean, there's a reason why when you go to a city, there's so many influences there that you don't even realize are impacting your everyday life and filling your minds full of things. There's plenty and plenty of people that have examples after examples of these kind of impacts. So I wanted to share those with you because I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts as we kind of build on this theme. And I really believe that God has a special purpose for our church. I really believe that. I believe we're at the end of time. I believe we're out of time. There's no more time on the clock. We are literally on borrowed time. And so I want to leave you with this one thought. Mrs. White says in the book called High Calling, if we would at last share the reward of the righteous, We must wisely improve the time of our probation. Moments are more precious than gold. We don't have time to waste on things that don't have anything to do with our eternity. Or the time that we waste on these activities, do you think we could have maybe spent a little more time in relationships with those around us? Maybe family members, maybe neighbors, maybe friends, maybe grandchildren. Time is more precious than gold, and I do not believe that we have time to waste. She also says in Our High Calling, life is short, the things of the world must perish with the using. Let us be wise and build for an eternity. We cannot afford to idle away our precious moments or engage in busy activities that will bring no fruit for eternity. Let the time hitherto be devoted to idleness, frivolity, worldliness, be spent in gaining a knowledge of the Scriptures and beautifying life and blessing and ennobling the life and character of others. This work will meet the approval of God and win for us that heavenly benediction, well done, thou good and faithful servant. She also says in Adventist Home that Satan's strategy is to confuse the senses. Satan's work is to lead men to ignore God and to engross their mind so that God will not be in their thoughts. The education they have thus received has been of a character to confuse the mind and eclipse the true light. Satan does not wish people to have a knowledge of God, and if he can set into operation games and theatrical performances that will so confuse the senses of the young that human beings will perish in darkness while light shines all about them, he is well pleased. Brothers and sisters, we have a lot of light in our church. In fact, so much blessings. I have gotten so many blessings coming back and reading some of the things that Mrs. White has the insights that she's been given to our church, that I am just blown away at God's mercy on us and how much beauty He has in letting us know not to get tripped up with these things. But you know, brothers and sisters, I know that many of our young people struggle very heavily in this area. There is so much more of a weighty influence with their movies and televisions and video games, and we're not spending the time. Many of our young people are not spending the time in that relationship. And so if you guys have grandkids, you know, young people around you, even kids in the churches that you guys belong to, encourage them. Take them under your wing. Spend time with them. Mentor them. Lead them. Because, brothers and sisters, I believe that we are coming to a close where every decision will finally be made. So I hope that that was a little bit insightful for you as we kind of talk about some of these other things like social media and technology. I believe that there's a blessing that comes along with this technology, but there's also a danger, and we need to be aware. And even many that are, you know, of the elder generation, there still is a danger in pulling so much time away and getting sucked into, you know, social media. So I want to hopefully give you a little bit of information on that and give you a couple of tools to navigate for. But let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this morning, and thank you that the sun is out and it's warming up. And I just thank you for this opportunity to come to this camp meeting. And Lord, may we just have a wonderful time together here and enjoy the nature and enjoy the spiritual messages. But Lord, may we not leave this experience the same. May you just come into our lives in a mighty way and catch us on fire, that we may go back to our own spheres of influences and to inspire those around to just have a closer walk with you. We thank you for your patience. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.